Happy anniversary, Cyberpeace Institute.
Thank you
What a
very much.
pleasure to be part of this milestone event, taking place in a year which has underscored, like no other, our digital progress and our dependencies. And I invite you to take a moment to think about how we would have lived this pandemic differently had it happened just 20 years ago. How would many of us been able to work so efficiently and effectively from home? How would we have had events like today? How much slower vaccine research, collaboration between labs and across borders would have been, or the ability to share the medical community's firsthand experience with what treatment protocols were having the greatest success. How much more or less nuanced would our understanding of risks been had the world not been collecting, analyzing, and able to share in really near time infection testing and recovery rates? And how would we have minimized disruption to our children's education, or sometimes actually keeping them occupied while we were trying to do that effective work I just mentioned a few minutes ago? So while it sometimes feels like this has been going on forever, without our miraculously digitally interconnected world, we would have been in for a much longer, much more disruptive, and a much more deadly period in human history. And while it's cliche, this period has demonstrated our vulnerabilities to digital disruption, to the actions of malicious actors, to our ability to discern critical fact and fiction, and the potential for harms to individuals, to societies, to institutions and relations. It has shown all of us, regardless of our nationality, our political views, our religion, how much that we have to lose if each of us, individuals, as consumers, as citizens, as professionals, as policymakers, and as leaders, how much we have to lose if we do not do everything in our power to protect the digital environment and achieve cyberpeace. Now, most people consider peace to be the opposite of war or conflict. And there's something of sometimes a misperception that peace is a naturally occurring phenomenon. However, peace is not passive. It is not an equilibrium that occurs in the absence of conflict. We must actively construct and defend peace with the same or more resources, commitment, and ingenuity as those who seek to undermine it. Our arsenal, or our toolbox, is far from empty. So let me briefly touch on 3 specific powerful and empowering weapons to defend or tools to build cyberpeace. First, norms. Norms are powerful. As norms are voluntary and non-binding, some feel that they are inadequate half measures to protect us from digital harms. Or they feel that norms are weak because only those like-minded with you ascribe to them while others act without constraint. And these were the same criticisms that were leveled, for example, at the Anti-Personal Mind Ban Convention when it was signed in 1997. They asked, what good was an agreement amongst like-minded states when the major producers, the users, and the exporters didn't sign? But in addition to creating legal obligations for those who join the treaty and practical measures like stockpile destruction and victim assistance, an important takeaway from that convention is that it created a norm which stigmatized the use of these indiscriminate weapons, even for those who didn't sign it. So export markets dried up. And for those few that have retained these weapons in their arsenals, many have not used them for decades. Similarly, the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, signed in 1996, it bans all nuclear testing. And despite being ratified by 168 countries, the treaty has not yet, after 24 years, entered into force because it requires the ratification of 8 more specific states. However, it created a de facto moratorium. And when 2 states broke that moratorium in 1998, shortly thereafter, they announced their own unilateral moratoriums and have conducted no further tests, leaving just 1 state who has conducted nuclear tests in the past decade. So one lesson from the CTBT experience is that asking ourselves in the end, what's more important, hard-fought and negotiated words on paper, or do we want a change in actions and behavior, whether they're voluntary or compelled through legal obligation? Second, people are powerful. To be effective, norms and other actions need a critical mass. And so norms of state behavior require a critical mass of governments to adhere to that norm. But norms also need a critical mass of other actors to raise awareness, to socialize norms, to be advocates, to translate into practical ways our actions and behaviors that are incongruent with norms. We need the expert advice from technical communities. We need analysis from the academic community. We need data collection. The more, the merrier. So when I started supporting the chairs of the GGE processes in 2009, it felt a bit like a niche market. Somebody once jokingly called it a digital secret society. Only a handful of states were actively interested in the discussion. There was a small academic community working on these topics, and there was nearly zero, not zero, but nearly zero interest from the private sector, and there was no civil society engagement on the international security dimension of ICTs. Now, unfortunately, as our daily headlines attest, as individuals, communities, and nations, we increasingly have firsthand experience with very specific digital harms. The peace and security in the digital environment is no longer a niche discussion. It's a universal concern with people at the center, and their security is at the center. The securing of our devices, our systems, our data is a responsibility of every individual, every company, every government. Digital security must be a design choice and a consumer demand. It is an expectation and responsibility of our employers and a responsibility of those public institutions who we entrust to hold our digital lives and identities, as well as protect national assets and critical information and infrastructures that we depend on. The digital environment is a vastly powerful one, and we must secure it and ourselves as if our lives depend on it, because in fact, they do. Lastly, partnerships are powerful. Starting around the time of the 2015 GGE report and its consensus adoption by the General Assembly, and perhaps also as well driven by the failure of its successor in 2017, so many new and dynamic partnerships have been created. From nearly nothing before 2015, it is amazing to see the breadth and the variety of multi-stakeholder partnerships and new initiatives these past years. Some are picking up ideas that didn't find consensus within the GGE process. Others build upon and deepen elements of international agreements, such as the GGE recommendations. And others pick up on the roles and responsibilities of other stakeholder communities. It's exciting, it truly is exciting to look around and see the ranks of Team Cyberpeace, and it's constantly expanding and diversifying. Today, we look back at the risks and threats to peace that we've seen in the cyber environment this past year, and we also look ahead to what concrete actions are going to move us closer to cyber peace in the coming year. And we do so in the shared, and I think absolute conviction that cyber peace is powerful and possible. Thank you.